motion so they make the least amount of noise switching pages. All right, are we ready?
Yep, 7 o'clock.
Ready?
Yeah, hold on, let me get my papers.
I'll give you a couple seconds.
What's the new person?
30 seconds.
Oh, the new person? Because when I do roll,
What's his last name?
I like it best.
Tim Duncan.
Tim Duncan, okay.
Ready? Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Harrison Township Planning Commission meeting. Today is Thursday, February 16th, 2023, and we'll call the meeting to order at about 7:03. Roll call, please, Ms. Oparka.
Member Baccia?
Here.
Member Devlin?
Here.
Member Duncan, absent. Member Mulder?
Here.
Member Tominello?
Here.
Member Oparka, here. Chair Murray?
Present. Thank you. May we have approval of the agenda or any changes? I would like to actually just jump right out and table item D, the election of officers. We generally do that when 7 of us are present, so I would like to request to table that until all 7 of us are, either till the March meeting or all 7 of us are present.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda with omitting item D, election of officers, until the next meeting, March 16th.
Thank you, Mr. Tominello. May I have a
Support.
second? Mr. Mulder, thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. May we have approval of the minutes from our December 15th meeting, 2022? Seems so long ago.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll
from
support.
December 15th, 2022.
Thank you. Motion by Ms. Devlin, supported by Ms. Oparka. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Our first hearing and review this evening, please.
Case number 04-23-S, Holzbeck Investments, Jefferson Place.
Mr. Holsbeek, would you like to come forward, please? Thank you. How are you this evening?
Very good.
Good.
Chris Holzbeck, 239 North River Road. Hoping to be the developer of what we're referring now to as Jefferson Place condominiums. And we are in the preliminary site plan process. I've had many conversations with Adam. I've had a recent one with David. We've went through the fire marshal's reviews, we've went through the planner's reviews, the engineer's reviews. We have many of the items already addressed, which the engineer's reviews didn't come in until yesterday, so I really didn't feel the need to send everybody copies. We did make copies if anybody would like them of all the improvements. Fire marshal's improvements were to bring fire hydrants onto the site, which we show now. Conversations with Dave, I think that myself, the engineer, and probably my site guy that's gonna do the plans will sit down and make sure we're on the same page. We haven't changed much since we met with the same board for conditional zoning. We did have to add some parking spots. I think the architect and the township planner, we added all the units up, divided it by like 2.5 spots per unit. And we came up with 4 or 6 units less than I think Adam came up with. So when you look at the new site plans, we have more parking than what you saw previously. We did put them not facing the road. We put them in areas that didn't affect neighbors. I don't know if Adam had a chance to review anything new, but I think the new site plan will look good. We have had time to do a landscape plan. Landscape plan, we did according to what we thought was correct. We did get corrected, I think, by Adam saying that the neighboring property that's apartments is zoned RA1 or R1A, which is residential houses. We either missed the zoning on that That would be next to Building B, between us and the apartments. And Adam called out that we need a 3 or 4 foot berm with major fencing. I don't see the need between our units and the apartments for a major berm. If it works, we would want to go to ZBA and ask for a variance on that. If we're advised that they're stuck on having a major berm between the 70-year-old apartments and our new community, we'll live with it.
Well, why don't we, if we could, what I'd like to do is have the engineer and the planner summarize their points, and for the items that you've already received. You have a copy of both, right?
Yes.
And then I believe we have a representative from Selfridge. So we'll have him come in and summarize his findings. You have a copy, obviously you have a copy of the fire chief.
Yes, and I talked to Selfridge
Okay.
also.
Why don't we start there, and then we'll be able to address each of those items. And you said you had a extra documentation that shows the items that you've adjusted. Is that something that we do not
We've
currently
adjusted
have?
the landscape plan, we've adjusted the fire hydrants.
Ask, Madam Chair.
I'm sorry, say that again?
I was
not
gonna
sure if-
ask, he said they had new site plans, so.
Yeah, if we haven't seen those, then,
Yeah, well, we only got the notes from the city a couple of days ago.
okay.
And we've added recreational areas totaling,
Well, before you go into extreme detail, has anybody from the township seen those plans yet? Are those like brand new walking in the door tonight?
I don't believe so. Adam, did you get a copy from the?
I was copied on an email that you had sent.
with the drawings.
But not from the
anybody's had
township.
time to really go through them.
Yeah,
Right.
okay, all right. In that case, then, let's not address that.
Okay.
Since obviously we have to go with what's in front of us right now. But obviously, those can be used to address the comments after we summarize the information from the planner and
We really
the
had no
engineer.
sense on getting final site plan approval tonight. We
Okay.
would have to come back.
Yeah, yeah, all right. Okay, have a seat. Take notes, or, take note. Adam,
Yes.
please summarize your letter for us this evening.
Okay, so
Thank
you
you.
have in your packets a letter dated February 9th from me. So this is my planning review of this project. As you know, this project made it through Planning Commission recently and Township Board for approval of a conditional rezoning. And what they submitted at the time was very similar to what they're proposing now, and that's important because that needs to be consistent with the concept plan that was submitted and approved as part of the conditional rezoning. What they're proposing at Jefferson Place is a 28-unit attached residential condominium development. So there will be condominiums owned by individuals. As you recall, one of the conditions that was approved as part of the rezoning is that the rental of condos is restricted to a maximum of 6 out of the 28 units. But this is a condominium. And I wanted to mention the review process. That's important. It deals with what exactly the ordinance asks you, the planning commission, to be doing this evening. So because it's a condominium project, the ordinance requires a 2-stage process. This stage is the preliminary plan review. And according to the ordinance, at this stage, the planning commission must evaluate the overall plan for the site, including basic road and unit configurations, and consistency of the plans with applicable provisions of the zoning ordinance and the master plan. So we don't necessarily need to worry about all of the details yet, but you're certainly looking at things like building location and placement. You're looking at circulation. You're looking at the use itself that's being proposed, of course. So that's important. At the you are required to grant approval or not approval of the preliminary site plan. If you grant approval, what it gives them the opportunity to do is come back to you with a final site plan with all of the details that's required by the ordinance. And also they'll need to provide to you draft condominium documents, the master deed, the condominium plan set as well. So And they understand that that's the point, and it reflects the plan that they've submitted has less detail on it because at this stage, the ordinance isn't requiring it yet. So in my review letter, I've got a laundry list of comments. A lot of the comments are really kind of a heads up to the applicant so that they understand as they prepare their final site plan, some of the things that they're gonna need to address. I don't, there's a number of minor items like, adding a note to the site plan here, making a change, or revising a call out that is incorrect or an error. So I found some of those discrepancies. I don't need to really go through those. But I will kind of share some of the items that maybe are pertinent to tonight's discussion, this preliminary stage, and that will help them as they move forward. And I did have a conversation with the owner, Chris, who's indicated willingness to address any and all of my comments, which is good, and that they've already started to work on addressing these comments as well. Chris mentioned, and this is correct, that a major screen is required adjacent, in this area of the site, adjacent to the existing apartments. So it's interesting, the ordinance says that a major screen is required wherever multiple family is adjacent to either residential use or residentially zoned property, single-family residentially zoned property. Although this is an apartment building here, it is zoned single-family residential. So in theory, in the future, it could not be an apartment, and it could be developed for single-family, and if that were to happen, we would want that major screen. So that's why it's required. They've got the sufficient distance of a green belt. They just need to add a berm or a fence that the ordinance provides options, and some additional intensity of landscaping. More similar to the intensity of landscaping that they have along these edges of the site. But even along these edges, a berming would be required, or a fence with screen. Again, the ordinance provides several options for them to consider. One of the other things to note is just along the frontage, and they have a lot of frontage. It fronts 3 roads, Lance, Cruz, Pontchartrain, and Jefferson. The ordinance requires one deciduous tree for every 35 feet of length. And based on that calculation, they're a little bit deficient. So they need to add some additional trees along the road frontages. The applicant had mentioned parking. The calculations on the plan in terms of the total number of parking spaces, the ordinance requires a significant number of guest parking spaces. And based on that, they're deficient by 7 total parking spaces. You can see on the plan, they do have room probably in all likelihood in order to accommodate. I'm not exactly sure, maybe they would want to share where they're proposing to accommodate. But they do have room probably in this area and maybe along here to provide that additional guest parking spaces. So I'm not concerned about that. They have sufficient space on the site in order to accommodate that, but they should just know that moving forward. One of the things that we'll want to make sure is that the final site plan specifies the width of the proposed sidewalk along the frontages. It's not clarified. And also, the ordinance requires a sidewalk along the Pontchartrain frontage, and it's not shown on this preliminary plan. For a development like this, a multiple family residential development in this zoning district, the zoning ordinance requires a certain amount of open space based on the total number of units and whether they're 2-bedroom versus 3-bedroom units. Based on what they're proposing, they must provide open space at least of a size of at least 13,600 square feet. And the open space has to be outside of the required setbacks and outside of the required distances between the buildings. Now, you can see on the plan that they have, like this, all of this area kind of right here, even the detention pond, these areas here would all qualify as open space. They just need to provide us the calculations to confirm. And also the ordinance says, well-defined and improved recreation areas and facilities. So I would like to see, and kind of been indicating this for some time, it could be whatever you choose for your, the benefit of your residents. It could be picnic tables, it could be benches, it could be a garden, it could be a playground. Not sure, but the ordinance says defined recreation spaces within that 13,600 square feet. One thing that is important to note here, that they're looking to do 2 phases of this development. The first phase is gonna be this building A. This is an existing building. It was a former daycare. They're gonna convert this existing building into 2 condominium units. That's gonna be their first phase. And that's fine. They can propose phases, but what we need to be really careful about, and what isn't really shown on the plan, is what exactly will phase 1 consist of? Will it include just the renovation of the building? Will the existing driveways that currently serve the building remain as part of phase 1? And then when phase 2 occurs, then the reconfiguration, will the guest parking be provided as part of phase 1? Technically, you would need a couple of guest spaces, even just for phase 1. So we would just need to very clearly have them outline on the plan. Utilities that are needed to serve phase 1. Does the detention pond need to serve phase 1? Did we require them to put the sidewalks along Lance Cruise as part of phase 1? So those are all, even the sign, the entrance sign for the development, will that be part of phase 1? So we need all of those details to understand what exactly you would be approving as far as phase 1 versus phase 2. And obviously, if anything, is needed for this phase 1, needs to be part of phase 1. And then, as I mentioned, and I kind of listed out in my review, examples of the details that will need to be provided at the next stage, such as lighting, exterior lighting, even information about the specs for the lighting, pavement details, cross sections of the pavement, curbing details, utilities, a grading plan, soil erosion control plan, dimensions of all the parking spaces, details of the berm or cross section of the berm that would be required if you choose that one option for the major screen, ADA details for the parking, stormwater. I think Dave has comments about that as well. Mechanical locations and screening. One of the things that the ordinance requires is that we need to show where the mechanical and AC pads are going to be for these units and how they'll be screened. So those are an example of the details as well as the condominium documents at the next stage. So I don't see anything, at least in my comments, that would affect necessarily the layout of the site, the building placement, which we've already seen before when we looked at it as part of the conditional rezoning. So I wouldn't be against, I think there's things that we could talk about this evening, but I wouldn't be against moving forward with preliminary approval so that we can see those details at the next stage.
Thank you.
If you have any questions for me, try and answer them.
Commissioners, any questions for the planner at this time?
Just one. On page 2, towards the bottom, it says access to the site will be provided through 2 proposed driveways at Lance Cruise and 1 driveway on Pontchartrain.
Yeah, so I guess I'm not clear. I had thought, and when I looked at the plan set, and I'll kind of zoom in on this. It's really hard to see up on screen for whatever reason. It's not a bad. There's definitely a proposed approach here at this end of the or toward the end here by building B. Right now they have 2 existing, and I looked at this and saw that they're proposing to remove 1 existing concrete approach, so I kind of thought that meant they're proposing then to keep 1, add 1, meaning there'd be 2 on Lance Cruise. None are shown on Jefferson,
Yeah,
and only 1 is shown on Pontchartrain.
yeah, I'm planning on keeping Pontchartrain and the one new one. The existing one, we're only gonna keep it for phase 1. And it even says, if you go down, there's a note that explains it, saying,
Okay,
we're gonna keep it for phase 1, but as soon as phase 2 starts, that's gonna be phased off, and we're just gonna keep the 2, 1 at each end of the development.
So that's a mistake then in my review. They're proposing just one from Lance Cruise and one from Pontchartrain.
I also, Adam, where it says 2 spaces in between building A. That road we softened up and brought down closer to Lance Cruise. That little radius there,
It's grown.
we made it much softer so that the driveways going into phase 1 were longer and that the spaces in between the units were more accessible. But we broadened that radius on the new plans to make it further away from building A than it shows.
If you like, I can demonstrate it. Want to demonstrate it?
Yeah, I guess we could probably get that crossed off the list right now then,
Yeah.
yeah.
What I did was, I made the driveway follow this line. Now it goes like this, and it goes up like that. So this driveway goes like this.
So the leftmost is
So,
extended?
yeah, so we're right here, we've lowered this line and lowered this line.
Okay, got it, thank you. Mr. Mulder, any other?
No, I saw the note, and I read your, letter, and
Okay.
I was a little confused,
I
so.
missed their note there.
Yeah, I just wasn't sure if I was reading something, so I thank you for your clarification.
Anything else, commissioners? For the plan?
And my question about the sidewalk on Jefferson. What does the ordinance require? Is that only a 5-foot sidewalk?
Yeah, for Jefferson, it's only a 5-foot. So the
So-
ordinance talks about a wider 8 to 10 foot when it's adjacent to a principal or an arterial road as designated in the master plan. And I checked, and Jefferson is not designated as one that would require the 8 to 10 foot wide pathway.
Even though we have the DDA
So
plan
that's
that
something that
says
you
it should be.
can ask for as a
Okay.
planning commission. Yeah, I know that.
Walk and do the one down Pontchartrain that's going nowhere.
Yeah, and
I don't think the neighbor would appreciate the walk down Pontchartrain, but it is
We did,
it is in the ordinance.
yeah, we did hear during the public hearing, residents along Pontchartrain who didn't seem to be in favor of having a sidewalk along Pontchartrain.
The first neighbor's gonna have a path through his front yard when the kids come off on the sidewalk.
Maybe we can trade that out.
I mean, I live in a location without sidewalk and I love when I get to the sidewalk to walk with my kids, but not everybody feels that way. I'm like,
Yeah, it kind of
I would
becomes a
trade it.
sidewalk to nowhere
And I
at the
think
end of the
that's
summer.
certainly something as part of your approval for the preliminary plan, you know, is to be looking at the site circulation and pedestrian circulation as one of those, and you
yeah.
can indicate that as a, you know, strong consideration, or however you wanna word that.
We're
You know,
making-
maybe a trade-off could be the Pontchartrain, loss of that versus widening it along Jefferson. You do have some flexibility in that provision in the ordinance to do some modifications to the requirement, so.
Madam Chair, the township did a non-motorized plan, long time ago, 2009, 10, 11-ish. We might have to maybe dig that back up and take a look and see what that says, but that might have some recommendations on what's required along Jefferson. I remember the township doing it. I was here when they did it. I wasn't, we had some of the staff in our office do it. I wasn't the one personally doing it, but I remember we did that plan for the township. I'm sure we can find a copy of it, so.
Okay.
I think we do show in the recreation plan, a trailway along Jefferson.
Well, that definitely is something to note when we update our master plan. I mean, we're
Yeah.
actively working on 10-foot wide paths along Jefferson, and we have them to the south, and we have them
Yeah.
to the north, so
Further
it
to the north.
should
right?
definitely be something that's required on Jefferson, I think, in order to connect those,
Tie that together.
yeah.
Good points. Okay, anything else for the planner? Any other comments, Adam? Oh, sorry.
I did have one question about the open space and recreation areas. You feel like there's enough open space on the site, like would there not, even with the deficient parking, that they'll meet whatever our requirement is for,
Yes.
okay.
So we just need the calculation, the
We
specific.
just need the
Oh, we
calculation.
actually have that, I mean,
We can give it to you tonight if you.
Sure.
I'll just show you where it is. We stayed 20 feet away from this building, and we stayed over 30 feet away from here, and we had an area right here, we're putting a playscape. And then, right here, we stayed 20 feet away, 30 feet away, 20 feet away. And this area becomes we moved the retention pond, we turned it into it could be either retention or detention based upon what our site engineers say, but we're turning it into a scenic pond, and I put a path all the way around with benches. And then over here, I've got a sliver of land right here, so what I did was these are public parking. I put a dirt path here, and then right here I have raised community vegetable gardens. And that, when I added all that up, it exceeded the amount required, square footage required.
And so do you have the percentage?
Yes, it's actually a square footage. I think we're at 3,700, and what required it was 36,000. Sorry, 13,700, and we're at,
That would be
required
sufficient.
13,600.
Okay. The requirement is 13.6?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, sorry, I had my thumb on it.
Happened over the last couple of days since we got the notes from the planners.
Yeah, we actually have 13,681.
Thank you. Okay.
And the square footage is actually marked off with dashed lines.
Good.
to meet the requirement.
Okay, anything else?
Yeah, with the mention of the playscape up there in the corner, will that be protected in any way, fencing around it, any screening or anything being,
It's a
I mean,
corner.
yeah, it's a corner out there at the intersection.
Well, the issue, one of the things too that the neighbors wanted was a playground. That's right at the corner where they could get to it.
So fencing it, or berming it, or
Yeah.
landscaping it?
I mean, if there was a sidewalk
I was just-
around, I was just thinking like, the sidewalk's gotta stay.
No, we just
Okay,
threw it in there,
But neighbors would be allowed to use that,
Well, I don't think it's a matter of allowing.
or, yeah.
I don't think it's a matter of allowing, but if a couple of kids start playing on it, what are we gonna do, take them off?
we'll have a better answer for that next time.
okay.
That'll be something you'll need to work out as part of the condominium, the ownership, common areas, that kind of thing, the maintenance. And
Who's gonna maintain?
this is gonna be a
that?
condominium development, so it's going to be privately owned by the condominium.
Right, but I mean, you'll have to include the details of that
Well, I
maintenance
think
and
about like
condo.
triangle property and stuff, there's no.
Sure, sure.
fence on that.
Yeah, that'd be like a final.
There's no berm, and, I mean, that is a common area, but also on North Point, the apartments there had a playground.
I personally
That
don't
isn't
like
fenced off.
escapes for the liability level.
For the,
Liability.
level.
And again,
Whether it's the HOA, the-
and especially on a
I
busy
just
road
figure
corner.
After a couple of years and this is done, it's gonna be the association, but I really wouldn't wanna leave the association with anything I wouldn't wanna assume myself.
It's good to know.
The playscape was just something I came up with, but it could be a picnic area. I actually called it a playscape and picnic area. We could just call it a picnic area if you wanted to.
We'll improve on that by the
the ordinance doesn't say what it needs to be necessarily, so that's gonna be up to
Something,
them. They
right.
should just determine what's gonna be in the best interest of their project, but it does have to be defined recreation space.
Okay.
Got it. Okay, anything else? Okay, shall we move on to the engineer's letter, please? Mr. Newmer?
Good evening, Commissioners. Just to start off with, I'll say that there's a lot of kind of detail type stuff in my letter. I don't think there's any showstoppers necessarily. There's one or two items that may impact the site layout a little bit, but for the most part not. So I don't think there's anything really major here, so.
So the 12-inch water main,
Well,
That was
the
the big one that
detention
stuck
pond
out
more
for
than
me.
anything, so we'll get to that in a second.
okay.
So, just kind of going down through the letter here, we've got comments on sewer and water, both about just getting the existing utilities labeled correctly, some detail stuff on the plans. Comments about sewer and water that Each of the building, or each of the units has to have its own services, sewer and water, can't have one common one for the building. Once again, those are kind of details, those don't affect the site layout really at all. One of the kind of quirks of your ordinance is that it does require a 12-inch water main for commercial, industrial, and multifamily developments. There's an existing 12-inch water main on Jefferson. I know that the fire chief has made comment that they want to have some internal fire hydrants internal to the development. So I haven't seen a water main layout for interior to the development, but when we do, it's my understanding what the ordinance says that that's gonna have to be a 12-inch main. It's gonna come off a 12-inch water main on Jefferson. I don't know then if the interpretation of the ordinance is gonna be that it also has to connect to a 12-inch water main when it loops into either Lance Cruz or Pontchartrain. That might be something that we need to get some clarification on from the attorney. And we'll be willing to sit down and work through that with the developer, but once again, the sizing of the water main, it doesn't really impact the site layout or anything, so it's certainly a monetary issue for the developer that needs to be addressed, and it's a service issue for the township, but it's not, doesn't impact the site layout really to any great extent. Let's see, that's pretty much that for the sanitary. There's an existing 8-inch sanitary that used to service the school building that comes off of Pontchartrain. It needs to be shown on the plan as being abandoned. Once again, not gonna impact the layout, just a site detail. Stormwater management, they are showing a retention pond. It's unusual to have a retention pond versus a detention pond. The difference being retention ponds hold water and don't let it out, so they have to be much bigger. Detention pond detains water for a short period of time and then lets it out, so they can be smaller. In any event, whichever one is being proposed for the site, we would want to see at least some preliminary calculations that indicate that the footprint that they're showing on the plan is sufficient for the pond that they're going to need. We don't want to get past preliminary here and then find out the pond has to be 3 times bigger and they can't build some of the buildings. So it's on that kind of 30,000 foot level. How big does this thing need to be and does it fit with the rest of the stuff on the site? That's our comment on that. They made a comment about the city water station, which is the pump station at the corner of Lance Cruz and Jefferson. It's the stormwater pump station that the township owns. There's some equipment and things that need to be maintained. And we're gonna have to have access to that site so we can get into there and, pull pumps out and maintain and whatnot. So that's something we'll have to work out with the developer. Whether we get access directly off one of the streets or whether we get access internally from the site to it, however we can work something out with them, that'll work. A bunch of detailed comments on the site layout. Probably the only one that's of any consequence is the number of driveway access points. And I understand in my brief conversation with Mr. Holsby before the meeting that this has been addressed in some other venues and some other details. So I commented that I think an additional access onto Lance Cruz might be a good idea. Just looking at, if you're an interior unit and you're trying to get out on Lance Cruz in the morning to get out to work when everybody else is trying to get out to work and you're trying to make it around that corner and stacking some vehicles there, that kind of thing. I know that the fire department's also made comment about being able to access the site with fire equipment, and there's some pretty sharp radiuses in and out of there, so maybe another access off of Lance Cruz that had more of a straight shot into that driveway that parallels Jefferson. So those are my comments, that was the idea behind that comment. I think maybe as we continue to work through the site with the developer, understanding some of the conversation that's happened previously to this about the desire to actually limit the number of driveways and driveway approaches that they had, and then also how we're going to address the fire department's concerns. I think we can work through that issue with them. A couple of other details about the driveway was close to the building A, which they've already commented on. The length of the driveways for building A, which they've commented on. The sidewalk along Pontchartrain and Lance Cruz need to be either located in the right of way or easement shown for those. So some other minor detail type things on the site plan. So in general, those are our comments. Like I said, I don't think there's anything that's a deal stopper here. So.
Okay, Great.
If you have any questions, I'd be happy to address them.
Commissioners? Questions for the engineer? Regarding site plan layouts, stormwater management, water service, sanitary sewer. Okay, we also have, some information from Selfridge, and we have a representative from Selfridge. Would you like to come up and let us know who you are and address the letter, please?
Good evening. Thank you for allowing us the opportunity. I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. My name's Ken Baker. I work at Selfridge Air National Guard Base. I'm as the Air Installation Compatible Use Zone Program Manager. And I'd just like to thank the township for the opportunity to review the site plan and provide our comments with respect to the ACUS program, which pertains to it's land use compatibility program that was put together by the Air Force to work with community planning departments to address public welfare, health, and safety of the citizens in the flying unit, the military members. So I don't know if you have any comments regarding the letter that was provided by the wing commander. The one thing that it did point out was density compatibility in accident potential zone 2, which is we have our clear zone, accident potential zone 1, and accident potential zone 2. In accident potential zone 2, residential property is not recommended, but it is conditionally compatible with the density of 2 homes per acre or less. So that was the main thing that was the comment was with respect to that was provided by the wing commander. I don't know if you had any questions or comments with regards to that.
Commissioners?
Is the base notified at the time of rezoning? Because it seems like that
Yeah.
would have been good to know at that time.
Right, so I spoke with Sabrina about that. We were not notified as before the rezoning. And generally, that's something that we're going to work out in the future to address that lapse that occurred. That would have been, yes, ma'am, that would have been ideal time for us to be able to provide our comments. I know we understand it's a little bit late at this stage to address that.
Well, we welcome you here tonight, and we welcome your participation going forward, so.
And I did talk with Sabrina, and we're looking at maybe coming out next month and providing a little
Yeah.
bit more of a brief
Yeah,
to
I
you
think
guys.
that's a great
So
idea.
you understand what the concerns are and in ways we can partner to address compatible developments. Now, I'm sorry, it's not in the letter, and I did miss it. You were talking about the detention pond on the site. With detention versus retention, I completely understand that. In the FAA advisory circular that I provided a link to, the user, there's recommendations for detention ponds within the wildlife hazard zone. I don't know if we still have the figure that shows the site that I provided. Pull that up. I can show this. And I'll have to provide these
Is it your
additional.
map?
Yeah, it was the map that showed the site. It's a community planning map. Yes, that's the one. So I know there's a lot of stuff on this, so I can kind of come up and point, and then I'll come back.
That'd be fine.
Or I can actually just speak to it. You see there's 2 zones. There's like a green dotted line. See, it says perimeter B and perimeter C. Okay, so perimeter B is there's an FAA wildlife hazard circular that's out that provides recommendations. Similar to what we do, it's recommendations. It's not a requirement. But it talks about if you have to design a water retention feature within these zones. If you're designing any within perimeter B, then they recommend that the detention feature drain within 24 hours, and that there be no standing water if at all possible unless required. And if there is, and it gives guidance regarding type of slopes, rocks, and things like that. But I'll provide those references as recommendations that have been developed by the FAA.
Yeah, that would be great.
So, and then perimeter B, the C is the one that's further out, that if you put in something that might attract, like you put in a landfill or you put something else in that would attract waterfowl that come across our portion departure, that's when that'd be a concern. But you can see this is in perimeter B. So anywhere within perimeter B, that's a concern for us. And even a small detention pond, it's not one detention pond, but when you start to have a lot of them put out, it's a synergistic effect. So the less we can have directly along our approach and departure, where it's standing water feature, we completely understand having to put in stormwater detention, but having a permanent water feature or something is something we would not recommend.
You mean like a lake?
A detention pond
Metro park?
that completely drains within 48 hours.
Our plan is a detention pond. The plan just talking to the engineers, our plan is to have a detention.
Detention.
Right. That would drain completely.
Got it. Thank you.
And that's all I had, and I'll get those comments to you, Sabrina, I'm sorry. That completely. I don't know if there's any other questions for
Me
you?
and Mr. Baker had a conversation today, which was exactly what you said, so.
Ma'am?
Anything else to add?
Nope, that's it, ma'am.
Commissioner?
Appreciate the opportunity.
Any questions for Mr. Baker?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, we look forward to next month.
I look forward to it too, ma'am. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, the last item that we have before us is the fire prevention letter from Fire Marshal Shackett. You have a copy of that as well?
I do.
Okay. And he's pretty clear. Based on the review, the fire department is not recommending approval until the above deficiencies are corrected. And so, since he's not here to reference those items, we'll just point them out. The buildings on the plan do not show where the fire department connections will be located for the building that are required to be sprinkled. Has that been corrected or planned? Okay. The layout of the project shows existing hydrants on Lance Cruz and Pontchartrain. No hydrants were found in the complex. The layout of the complex with multiple turns makes using those hydrants impractical and unusable. Fire hydrants will need to be placed in the complex for fire department use.
Yeah, those other plans, that's about.
Signs that state no parking fire lane are required to be posted on one side of the road to assure that the fire department access road remains unobstructed. Okay. And I think that's, the other comment was the item that Mr. Newmer addressed about the 12-inch feed for the fire hydrants. Okay, commissioners, any questions regarding the fire prevention letter?
Just one, Mr. Newmer had mentioned, about access, adding another entrance in, for accessibility to the fire trucks. Was that your recommendation or something from the fire marshal that you had heard? Because it doesn't note it here in his letter, and I was just curious if that was another item.
No, I hadn't talked to him about it
Okay.
Directly, but I know from previous workings with the fire marshal about how they're interested about getting in and out of,
Isn't there a-
having access through the development and stuff, and I could just,
Let's say 60
looking at it,
feet.
that would be very difficult to run a fire truck through, so.
Okay.
That was part of the rationale for my, my thought about having another access point.
And I've had numerous conversations in the past 2 weeks with Larry Shackett. I've been on the phone with him more than my wife. He was not concerned about the road with the turns. His biggest concern was hooking up the fire hydrants and having 90-degree turns in the fire hose. So Larry and I have spoke probably every other day since the letter came out.
Okay.
And we worked together with it. Jeff has worked with them. We've worked with Brent, the building official. Our last conversation was, he was fine with the configuration of everything, except he wanted fire hydrants where the hoses didn't have to make a 90-degree turn in the hose, not the truck, to get to extinguish the fires.
I
Better
found
delivery,
spots where
yeah.
that happens on the site, so I have 2 more fire hydrants.
So in the plans that you guys will see, by next time, they're already complete now, but like I said, we got complete the last couple days. That is all addressed. And as far as I know, Larry is happy with everything that we did. We worked with him and gave him whatever he's asked for.
And he sent him a drawing.
Okay.
You can revision.
Thank you.
Send the building official out.
Anything else? Okay, we have, the plans that we have in front of us were the plans that we reviewed, based on the contents of all of the letters, and so on. You've indicated that you have updated plans, addressing many, all, most of, 50%, 80%?
we've addressed everything that was not site engineering, because I'm not a site engineer. We haven't hired a site engineer yet.
Okay.
My company I work for actually has site engineering. They haven't been included because we normally don't bring them on board until the layout's been approved and agreed upon. And otherwise could be wasting their time if we keep moving buildings around and roads around and adding driveways.
Our next phase of engineering is $50,000 to $70,000. So we're hoping to get through preliminary plan approval and then sit down with David and possibly Adam to address all the 12-inch water mains, the landscape issues between the apartments. Those are minor issues that I think are gonna be resolved pretty easily. But the engineering, the heavy engineering portion of it, as far as the underground, the retention versus detention, those have gotta be thought out with your township engineers.
Engineer to
I might
engineer.
do things a little different than what they're used to. I will request a meeting with Dave or Adam and my underground contractor, which we don't do the engineering, but pick the underground contractor, go with the cheapest bid, we go with the guy that did the last 25 jobs with us. So we're gonna sit down and talk about everything. 12-inch water mains are absolutely ridiculous, but if that's what's required, there's not a lot of getting around it. But if there's reasons that they don't have to have one in a 28-unit development, we'll come up with it legally if we can do it. We're gonna recommend what we would like to see, but in the end, we have to abide by whatever the township or the engineers tell us is the difference.
Okay, regarding any of the information that we've addressed from Mr. Baker from Selfridge, Mr. Newmer in engineering, and Mr. Young in planning, and the comments on Fire Marshal Shackett's letter, is there anything in particular that you want to address specifically, in addition to what you just shared with us?
I think we've put everything on the table.
Okay, all right. So I think we would appreciate a copy of, even though they're not gonna, go ahead.
They're not able to hear his comments because he's not at the podium.
Oh, okay, sorry, Mr. Holzbeek, you get to come up and, let's do a rewind on that. Thank you.
Chris
Sorry, guys.
Hallspec, 239 North River Road, developer of Jefferson Place. We have had many conversations through the past couple of weeks with the township planner, the engineer, Mr. Baker from Selfridge. Sorry, you relate to the party, we understand that, but we had that conversation today. We've been through the conditional zoning with the same board. We're asking for preliminary site plan approval. What we haven't agreed upon with the previous letters that we got from the fire chief or the planners, we've addressed, and we're all on the same page. I think everybody here can agree the fire marshal is not here. But I assure you that my conversations with Larry Shackett, we are on the same page. We addressed all of Larry's issues. So tonight, we're asking for a preliminary site plan approval, so at the next meeting, we can come in with some full-blown engineered drawings. I plan on doing everything that is asked of me, because I don't like coming to these meetings at 7 o'clock every other month. So I'm pretty easy to go as a developer comes by. We have a great architect, Chemtech, which is an in-house company to our architect, will be doing the engineering. And as I stated before, we'll have meetings if the engineers will allow us to come up with the plans correctly the first time. So we don't have to do this over and over and over again. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, commissioners, questions?
I have an additional question for Adam.
Okay.
It's page 5 of your letter, item 12.
Yes.
Could you elaborate on that a bit?
So what I had said there is that it appears that there are a few locations on the plans, on this site plan drawing, when I compare the floor plans, which are other sheets, I see that there are locations where there's a two-car garage. And this is one location where I believe this ranch unit at the end has a two-car garage. They don't provide dimensions for these driveways, but I believe this appears to be a single-car garage when you compare it to the width of this one. So I just called that out as a mistake likely in this drawing. that needs to be resolved. The other location is, I think, Building A, where these are both two-car garages, and it appears that the driveways are only wide enough for a single car.
Those revisions have been made. The reason why what happened was that we converted the townhouses with one garage and
That shows the
ranches, and the driveways didn't get changed, that's all.
So a matter of the building plans being updated, or the floor plans being updated, and this feeling to keep up with the update,
Okay.
I suppose. So,
We had some typo mistakes where garage was actually listed as a bedroom, I believe, and we corrected all the mistakes.
So for building F, that being said, it strikes me at building F that in fact, the unit that is closer to Jefferson, if that really was a two-car garage, that would mean that the whole plan doesn't work on that site. Doesn't everything kick over another 8 to 10 feet, and then you got some kind of a conflict occurring someplace there?
Is
No,
this,
we removed the unit.
No. All right.
Yeah, you're gonna have to come up to the microphone so we can.
All right, so fair to that then, because, I can only see what I see, all of us can, so, yeah, that just struck me as a pretty substantial conflict. So that being said, hold on, I'm gonna finish
Yeah.
my observation.
They don't have that yet.
Got it, because where that was driving me here a bit was on page 4 of your letter, under item 7, where you have the chart.
yeah, the
This
parking-
starts, this whole chart starts to play into that same observation fundamentally. Because if you look at this drawing, and it still may end up being more to be considered, I believe. If you look at this drawing, I only count on this drawing 8 two-car garages by way of the drawing itself. Everywhere I see a driveway that's
by a wider driveway.
it's gonna be a two-car garage, right? So that
Yeah.
counts up to 8.
Yeah.
So I looked at it, personally speaking, that meant for the two-car garages, you got 8 times 2 is 16 spaces, which then meant you had 20 garages that are single-car, which is 20 times 1, right? So that came up to 36 spaces, not 40, so perhaps the deficiency could even be greater than this document here. Now, I get it, there's another drawing that's out there that may clarify, but right now I'm looking at that, I'm not even sure 97 is provided on
Yeah.
this document by way of the drawing. Next thing, clarity to that is, likewise, so for the units that are the units that have a one-car garage, right, which is most of them, and they have by way of the drawing, which I've not gone through and done a complete analysis, and you do address it, I think, in your letter, by way of the drawing, it appears to only be enough room to stack one car on the driveway.
Right,
That means that unit is providing 2 parking spaces, right?
correct,
Yeah, but in the own ordinance says the unit has to have 2.5.
right,
So isn't there like even a deficiency there? Because you can't count your other half on the neighbor's driveway,
right.
right?
So,
We have off-street parking.
right, so, yeah, good comments. I did look through, I do believe that there are 97 spaces shown here. I did do the count. I think, I assume that this is actually a two-car driveway, because that's the case for it's a two-car garage. Same thing here, so I guess in that sense, I assume that correction would be made, I'm sorry, that the correction would be made to this driveway, and then one by building F, so that adds 3 parking spaces by virtue of those being revised to two-car driveways as opposed to 1. I do think then the count is correct with those corrections, so they would need to find space for at least 7 additional parking spaces. So, I mean, it doesn't make sense to have a 2.5-car garage, or 2.5 parking spaces for each unit, because you can't have a half parking space, so it's logical that you would be able to count the on-street parking. And so, in that sense, it's important that the on-street parking is in close proximity to these units and can serve, these are evenly distributed through the development. So, in all likelihood, to accommodate the 7, they'll probably have to add a few here, probably have to add a few here in order to make that happen.
There is no ordinance defining close proximity.
No. So we just have to look at that and determine that there's sufficient to serve the development.
So that means the next site plan needs to be specific.
And if you look at kind of how they're distributed right now, this is the area where they're lacking, quite frankly, that there's 2 parking spaces for building F. And even if you look at building, E, the closest would be kind of this way. So, if they're looking to add, they've got 6 here, 2 here, 2, 2, and 3. So, they could add a couple more here, but I think the point is that they should evenly distribute these spaces, and probably, so the additional should, I'm thinking, likely be in this area or here, but it's gonna be up to them to determine that.
Then that would affect their open space
Yeah, I was gonna-
calculations too. That's why I asked
Yeah.
about the open
So-
space earlier.
And that might be I know that with their updated plan, that they've addressed these items. The question is, their assurance to us this evening that they're providing enough open space, does it include 7 additional parking spaces as well?
And so you really haven't had an opportunity to review the new plan in detail at all? Okay. And not expecting you to, I'm just asking, because I know it came in today. Okay. Mr. Batchel, anything else?
No.
Thank you. Okay, commissioners, questions for the applicant or his architect?
So I'm wondering if the new plan addresses Adam's comments number 4 and 5, in particular, the existing trees and what trees are proposed to be removed.
Yes, the existing trees are now located on the
Would you like to come up so that we can make sure that you're heard? Thank you.
Yes, the existing trees are now located on the landscape map, or landscape plan.
And just to clarify, the next time the board sees a site plan where Adam showed the 3 parking spaces, we have now added 5 parking spaces. One of those will be handicap accessible.
5 total or 5 more?
5
Total.
total. There's 3 there. We added 2 there so that building had the additional half spaces. We agree, you can't do 2.5 spaces in the driveways. 4 spaces in the middle in front of the retention pond are staying the same. If we go down by the pump station,
We've added 5 there, we've added 5, 9, and then we've added 6.
so where it says 6 overflow, there's 5 spaces, and then we put landscape in between. Where there's 3, we added 4 spaces. Then we go down in front of building B, we have 6 total spaces instead of 3. So we split the spaces that Adam asked for between all of the buildings to keep them in close proximity. And we will show you that on the next site plan, along with in front of building A, I think possibly Dave had the comment that the driveway was a little short. We moved the road, we made it straighter along Lance Cruz to keep the road further away from building A to make those driveways longer.
And we can add more parking even if we desire. I mean, there's still room to add that doesn't interfere with the recreation space.
We kept the parking to the requirements because of the neighbors' concerns with lights and everything else.
And then I think, Mr. Batchel, your other concern, well, not just the depth of the driveway, but the width. That was a visible missing.
Yes.
Well, it appears it was an error in the drawing.
Any place that there's a 2-car garage, the driveways will be a minimum of 18 to 20 feet wide. Any place there's a 1-car garage, driveways will be a minimum of 9 to 12 feet wide.
And I'm just gonna throw this out there, has with that being said, the green space has been calculated to that specification?
Yes.
Okay.
And the landscape berms, the playground areas or the recreational areas are all addressed as of this meeting. We just didn't have the time to get everybody the plans. I didn't want to send them out today and have mass confusion, but we will get them out way in advance of that.
That would be great, yeah, so we have time to do our homework.
We worked very diligently on getting it done, but I think
Well, no, that's
that
good, you're
Adam and Dave
you're
can
ahead of
tell
the
you,
game.
and Sabrina can tell you that everything was dwindling in this week as we came and we addressed it.
That's okay, you're ahead of the game. Okay, commissioners, any other questions? Comments?
Have you had a chance to talk to Macomb County Public Works yet?
The road commission,
No, the Public Works Department?
soil erosion,
Soil
no.
erosion, and then also, now it's not just volume control in your stormwater, it's rate control. So that could be an issue with your pond sizing.
With the detention pond and the sewers and everything that are on site, the engineers could probably attest to it. When we bought the property, we had conversations with Chemtech, who I would pay to have those conversations for me.
I just don't want you to be surprised, so
I will be shocked, not surprised. So,
they're new standards, so.
I can't
You
say
would not
that
be
I'm
the first
privy
one to
to
be
all the
shocked.
new stuff, but from what I've been told from the engineers, that there's enough water, sewer, and capacity for this project.
Well, this is stormwater I'm talking about, so.
Stormwater, if the detention ponds or whatever aren't appropriate, we can always maximize the size of pipes or whatever, which we'll work with. Weight trim. And the detention pond makes
just
a
a
lot more
suggestion,
sense than a retention pond, so.
It's just a suggestion that before you get too far down the road, you might want to have
We're
that
already there.
conversation.
Yes, we will have those conversations.
That's good advice.
Yes, we'll have those conversations.
Anything else, Ms. Dillon?
Well, I mean, as far as the landscaping plan, privet is typically not something that's used anymore. That's kind of an old-fashioned landscaping plant. It might even be on the list of plants that are recommended to not be used in residential applications in the county. Amanda would know that better than me because her department put that together. But it's, that, and there's like the autumn glory clematis, a couple of like old-fashioned types of landscape plants that are just not recommended anymore, and privet is one of them.
We went through all the non-recommended things that are on the recent township ordinances and made sure
Which it probably isn't
We-
reflected with.
we do not have any of those on the
Updated
plans. I'll
anyways.
assure you, Precision Landscape did the plans for me.
Yeah.
But if the township has a preference on trees and landscape, put them, give me an email, I'll be happy to address them, and I don't care if there's privet or autumn glories in here, if we're using rainbow maples.
The tree list I think is good, except there's not a lot of like medium height trees. There's like very tall canopy trees that take a while to get there. And then just the privet would be the only one. And burning bush isn't used so much anymore because it does eventually get very large and requires trimming every year. So there's just, maybe your landscaper might wanna take a look at the maintenance of those and whether they're, contemporary plantings that are used now that
You're telling me I'm old because I just put 30 burning bush in my backyard.
I have one in my backyard
Hey,
too, and the
Danielle.
man has to get out there every year and trim it, and he doesn't
I'll
like
be
it.
happy to work on a landscape plan if the board wants to appoint somebody and sit down with, I have Precision Landscape does our landscape, very reputable company, been around forever. And if
Yeah.
there's something that you guys would like to
Yeah,
see, I have no problem changing the landscape around.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? As it was stated, this is a preliminary, a preliminary site plan ask. where a lot of the nitty-gritty details aren't required or can be worked out.
Do we wanna talk about that sidewalk,
Say,
the sidewalk?
yeah, we can talk about that, sure.
Uh,
Jefferson or Pontchartrain? Both?
Both.
Both.
Okay.
Both. You know, I think maybe we didn't rezone it to V1A, but it's still in the downtown district, and, like I said, we have 10-foot path on Jefferson to Shook, in the Shook area, we have it in the South River area. It would only make sense that we would
Ask for
require any new development on
On
Jefferson
Jefferson.
to have, I think we even required the Speedway to do 10-foot wide,
We did.
on Jefferson. They did Jefferson and Crocker, because Crocker also is part of that plan. And I have seen the pathway plan that Dave referenced, because we used that when we did our complete streets plan, and we do have a complete streets plan that was adopted by the township that calls for that 10-foot wide
Okay.
path. So as far as waiving the sidewalk on Pontchartrain, I was thinking that would be okay, but, then with the whole notion of putting a playground there, it seems critical to have sidewalk, so that residents can get from the parking area to that, to then this pathway, to then hopefully eventually go to the Metro Park or go to, Lori's Lick 'em Up, you know?
Amanda, if we don't have to have a playground required by ordinance, I'm not having a playground.
I'm not saying you have to get rid of the playground.
I want to get rid of the playground. That was just a last minute thing that the
I threw in
architect and
because-
myself did not talk about. I do not want swings, slides. I have no problem with benches and landscape mulch, but I do not want any type of play area. Is the reason that I didn't want the parking in the backyards of the places. I don't want strangers butting up to the private residences where they have to worry about their kids going out and having not some 5 or 7 or 10-year-old kid swinging on a swing set, some 16-year-old or 18-year-old influencing them with, I handle it the same way I'd handle having my kids in a backyard. I want them with people that I know. I'd like these to be more of a house setting than a multi-setting, where they have backyards and some privacy, which I think the area warrants very well. But I really am not excited about having any type of play structures on the site.
I think that would be very smart, and I think maybe you might want to think about maybe like a flower rest area, right? So a small garden with a few, flower garden with benches, and makes it looks nice, people can stop and rest, and then you don't have to worry about that.
Pleasing to Jefferson.
I agree 100%.
Yeah, I think you're probably looking for trouble if you put a playscape out there.
I do not, after everything that's happened in the past 5 years, do not want to make kids susceptible to strangers.
If
Understood.
that's the case, if you want to maybe think about it.
So that being said,
You're still thinking about it.
The residences will have the ability to put
From the residents,
play
if they're okay.
apparatuses in their backyard if they're approved by the HOA.
but that's up to the HOA.
That's up to the HOA.
Not part of our, okay. So, to take your point one step further, 10-foot sidewalk on Jefferson to meet our planned requirements and improvements for the township, and a sidewalk, taking the play structure
Yeah.
completely out of the picture. 5-foot sidewalk, or 4-foot sidewalk on
5.
Pontchartrain? I think it's 5?
Ordinance requires minimum 5 for a
Okay.
sidewalk.
All right, so 5 foot, then how do we, and I know it's probably a more in-depth question, but how do we plan that to end? And you'd said one of the residents had made a comment about, concerned about the sidewalk dumping right into his yard.
Typically, you would take it to the property line so that future development would connect to it.
Adam, maybe you
And
can
so
help me
to
out
the-
here.
Well, let me just take that one question now. So to the property line or to the landscaping
Property line.
property line?
Yeah.
what we've did in the
Sidewalks are
past in
frustrating,
other
but there's no
communities,
Yeah.
I know.
such as Clinton Township, that likes to have sidewalks, but in some areas, there's not a sidewalk within miles, but it's in the ordinance. We've put it in, and I'm not familiar if I can do it with a multifamily, but we have signed an affidavit saying that if the community adds sidewalks down Pontchartrain, that this development will pay for the sidewalks and add them at the same time, so it's not a cost to the township. But we've been able to just basically do I think it's an affidavit signed that says when it happens, that Jefferson Place will participate, they will pay for the cost of the sidewalk running down Pontchartrain. We would have to have Mr. Huth and my attorney, Mark Abdu, maybe Adam, come up with the wording, but that's what we've did in other communities.
So you don't think your residents would like a sidewalk?
I'm more than happy to put a sidewalk in. I was listening to the residents down Pontchartrain that don't want to path through their front yard because the kids are just gonna go.
Yeah, they,
So
I'm a concrete guy. You want some
So-
concrete?
Walk in
They
the
will.
street till I get to the sidewalk, and then,
I wouldn't mind seeing a sidewalk from basically Jefferson to the Pontchartrain entrance, and then not beyond the entrance to the property line, but with the same, type of scenario you just said, that if the neighborhood got it, that somewhere in your deed or whatever, that it would say you would connect that small section between the entrance and the property line. That's personally what I would like to see.
I would agree with that.
That could
That's
be
a
a
great
good-
idea.
Yeah, I
That could be a
It's a
good
nice compromise.
compromise, sure.
Yep.
but we're still good with the 10-foot wide sidewalk on Jefferson.
I didn't say that.
That's,
Concrete.
that's what I'm,
That's a long sidewalk. Are all the new sidewalks 10 feet wide?
yes,
On Jeff-
shared use path. The long-term goal is to have a shared use path all the way along Jefferson. It's in regional plans, the county plan, the township rec plan, I think now references that.
Actually, I was able to find the non-motorized plan. It does say, the northern part of the Jefferson section, the existing sidewalk will replace with a shared use path. That's exactly what it says.
Adam, to get a variance on the berms between the apartments and myself, will I have to go to ZBA on that?
In order to, for the screening between you and the apartments, if you are not able to comply with one of the major screen options, then the only way around that would be to secure a variance. One of the options is a fence with evergreen screen.
Which is the option down both of the residential also.
Yes,
It's the same thing.
yes. Yeah,
It's heavy-duty screening.
yep, it's one of your options, yeah, just make sure that, you're, noting that section of the ordinance, which I cited in my letter.
Personally, I think it is not, or it is a good idea to lose the, playscape. That does require a lot of maintenance, and as you said, liability. But what would be nice there would be some sort of landscape feature that's on the corner maybe of Pontchartrain and Jefferson that would,
Exactly what Larry said.
yeah, it would dress it up and, add visual interest as well to folks driving by.
We agree.
Yeah. Yep. That's a nice thought.
Could do something really nice there.
Anything else?
I do.
Mr. Betcha?
Adam, let's go back to page 4, item 7 again.
Okay.
I believe, I'm gonna state with my observation, and then I'll go through my thought process. I believe the document needs to depict 36 spaces that are defined by, I don't know what the term you'd use, just as the adjacent spaces that are off a road, not directly part of the garage or the driveway. Okay? Why do I believe it's 36? Because right now the drawing I'm looking at shows 21. So I think the deficiency in the drawing is even greater than what you said. And here's why I think it's true, and I think it's still kind of circling back where I was poking at earlier. So if I look at 12, I'm going to accept that the drawing has been amended, that there's now depicting 12 two-car garages. Check mark, I'll use that map. So 12 two-car garages, I'm back on page 4, kind of using that chart quickly. 12 two-car garages times 2 is 24 there, plus 16 one car is 16, which is the 40 cars in a garage, check mark, right? Now moving down the page, for the units that require the three space units, it's 12 units times 1. Even though there's space to put 2, it's only times 1. Because now what you're doing is sharing somebody else's driveway to solve your parking,
Right.
right? So it's 12 times 1, which is 12, and 16 times 1, which is 16, which is 28. So I think it's a 40 plus 28 is 68. And if the code says you need 104, that's the 36 that I think needs to be spread throughout the project. Because if I count the 2 here, so 4 for that one unit, when you do the total calculation, you are now sharing, part of that parking deficiency is being shared by somebody else's driveway. So you solve it by having to put, I believe, 36 units, parking spaces on the site plan.
Outside of the garages and the driveways is what you're saying?
Yes,
36 spaces beyond the garages.
garages and driveways.
But one of those spaces, though, that's in front of there's 3 that are for the ranch, and 1 is for the guest parking for that ranch.
Right, I get it.
So that-
But I think you
so
got,
go back to
you need
where
your
we were.
28, you need your 28 for visitor. But I believe the way this configuration is set up, that you still need, in order to solve the 2.5, basically, right? You gotta find now for those other remaining spots, you have to now solve for that other half someplace else. So
But
you
they-
can't, 28 right here does not solve your parking.
But they can park in front of their, if they're visiting a house, they can park in the driveway.
But these driveways only allow,
Well, I'm talking
One
about the
car.
ranchers, we get an extra parking space in front of each ranch.
yeah, that allows
So
one car. That was
so,
my
I mean,
16
we're
times
meeting
1.
I'm meeting the requirement of the planner, though. I actually used his numbers. I threw my numbers out, and I used I used Adam's numbers on the drawings. So I went exactly with what your planner told
No,
us.
I understand. The 104, I'm not debating that. I'm just saying the way it's configured right now, that you can only count 1 car garage and 1 parking space for those units, right?
Right, for each unit that has 1 car garage,
Yep.
they're being provided with
One driveway parking area that
parking
gets you your
space
2.
in their garage,
Yep,
parking space in their driveway.
yep.
And then that's it, which would be their personal space. Right,
2.
so that's 2.
Mhm.
But then there are other spaces in the development.
Yes, that they gotta solve for them. So there's 8 that they gotta solve for those units. Maybe this is a better way of proving my point. You have to find 8 additional parking places for those units, right, for the half, right?
But not everybody's
For-
gonna
let
have
me finish.
company.
For the half part, then you still gotta solve for the 28 for the visitors.
Right.
But
There's
isn't that why they have
36
the
again. That's
2
why I
and
get
a
back to the
half?
36.
That's
It's
where
2
you
and a
get
half.
the,
So you're
yes.
saying that
Right.
half times whatever
So are,
number.
I guess, so are you saying that, based on the ordinance, based on the, if you look at this development in cumulative, there's 104 spaces that are required, based on the number of units and the bedroom types, and the number of visitor spaces that are required, 104 total. So based on your calculation, I'm sorry, I'm not following, I just can't.
Yeah, you
Grip
almost
it
have
in
to,
my
you almost
head
have to
right
like
now.
write it down, I get
Yeah.
it, because there's a lot of numbers.
Okay, well, even using the
You're
chart,
saying that, that there needs to be more than 104 to make up. for
On the drawing,
fraction?
in order to make it work,
More than 104.
yeah.
okay,
To make it work, because it's the half. For that unit, that is only a 1-car garage with 1 driveway parking, right? That unit still requires 2.5 parking places, right? And there's 16, correct?
Eight that you're trying to count.
So
single,
you gotta find 8 somewhere on the site just to solve the unit. Am I missing something?
If there's 16, I get 8.
Right, there's your 8, And then you still have to provide 28 visitors, right?
So the question I have with
So
the,
it's the 36, that's my same 36.
But
I think
Adam's
You
numbers
just
are
show up
correct
here
then.
someplace.
so the visitor
bad.
parking spaces, when you're, I'm trying to follow, and I get where you're at so far. The 28 visitor spaces, are you subtracting 12 for the two-car garage units? Because they will have their 2 cars in the garage, 1 parking space in the driveway, but then their visitor space wouldn't be one of those off-street parking spaces. It would be the other empty space in the driveway. So you would subtract that out of the spaces you would need, scattered throughout the property for their visitor space at the 2-car garage ones.
If we could. and I
Understood,
understand your
understood the
point.
point, yeah.
Okay, I'm still trying to work out the math exactly where we're at when we
We
start
could-
playing
we
with
could
those
kind of-
numbers like that.
If we could back up a little bit and look at a higher level and kind of, I'll be honest with you, I'm looking at this, the parking provision, as a cumulative number for this development. And the reason I'm doing that is I believe that we don't want to have more parking at this site than what is required by ordinance. And I'm saying that, based on my experience, I believe that your ordinance requires too many parking spaces for a multiple-family residential development. That's just my personal opinion. 3 spaces for a condominium, for a 3-bedroom unit, 2.5 spaces, when we require 2 for single-family is all that we require. The visitor parking space requirement, certainly important, but I would argue that 28, 1 for each is excessive, personally. I'm looking at this, kind of reconciling that in my head as kind of the big picture as the planner, that I'm looking at this site and saying, if they provide 104 total spaces at this development, that they have met the ordinance requirement, because I don't want them to have to put more parking spaces in this development.
So a majority of them fall into the requirement for the 2 and the single, for the double and the single.
Right,
And
and
then-
we haven't talked about, like, do these parking spaces that are on street, are they going to be designated as visitor parking spaces or not?
Yes.
So then Ken makes a really interesting argument then,
Yeah.
which makes sense then. If, for the units that have capacity for 4, that's their visitors already provided, right?
In their
So then
driveway.
therefore,
sense.
that deducts,
Right. the-
12.
12.
From that
From
8,
the,
right,
So you're
which
actually-
now turns the argument even more
Right.
positive,
for,
right, which is cool, because I don't disagree that
Or the
too
other
much
way.
parking,
yeah,
but I'm just following what
I
the
understand.
ordinance says.
Even though you're a concrete guy.
But at the same time, if you have a 3-bedroom unit and there's 3 different people living in there and they each have a car, you wanna make sure that they're not parking on the access ways or
You could actually have a 3-bedroom unit where nobody has a car too.
Good, but we have to accommodate
no
for.
sidewalks.
Right, but not every 3-bedroom unit has 3 adults.
So
sitting
under
in
that
the
logic,
16.
which is interesting, well, then you'd only require 24 spaces.
Well, and that's the, and
Right.
that's the 2 cars, so 2 car and 2 car. So
Which is an
3
interesting
and
argument.
extra.
So then you only need 24 spaces that are part of the adjacent available parking.
Is there a lot of question if we're abiding by the ordinance that we're giving that we're good?
Yeah, okay, so that being said, provide 104 and move on.
Good job.
Maybe it's
I get, it's somewhere in between,
you're right.
because you could spin it either
This
way.
is,
not wrong.
this is a tricky,
Yeah.
site that we're dealing with here.
Right,
and-
right.
And, with the goal of not wanting more pavement, I think,
Our original
Should,
plan
yeah,
had
we
all
don't
kinds of
disagree with
parking.
that
Yeah.
objective.
Right.
right.
Yeah, we reduced the number of units, which greatly reduced the number of parking.
You reduced the number of units, you did say that.
That was from the
Very
original,
first
From the original.
conditional rezoning request to the amended conditional rezoning request.
When we heard the neighbors concerned about parking and everything else, we reduced probably 20 spots out of it by adding the ramp.
And taking out,
All right, so much for that brain pretzel.
Well, it's just a delicate balance between more pavement and enough spaces so that you're not overflowing
Right,
and
right.
providing discomfort for the other residents. It's a tricky balancing act, you know?
So back to the fire marshal's letter, where you said you would agree with his point on the no parking fire lane signs on one side of the road.
Yeah, I have them actually on the drawing.
Is there gonna be any would there be parking allowed on the other side of the road, or is there no parking, parallel parking anywhere in the road? So that'll be designated,
No,
so
no
it's
parallel
only
parking.
parking in the parking space, okay.
We'll see.
Well, there's no parking all over the township and it doesn't happen, so,
And that's what the HOA is all about.
yes.
It is.
Anything else, Mr. Bishop? Okay, Commissioners, anything else?
So my only other concern is going back to the number of entrances. I like the fact that there's only one on Pontchartrain, and I like the fact that the one on Lance Cruz is far away from the intersection of Lance Cruz and Jefferson, so you're not
I do
having the
too.
people turning out right by the intersection. With the location though, I still feel like the people, the buildings that face Jefferson may have more of a likelihood to go onto Pontchartrain, because especially for, I can't see the building number, the one in the top right.
This one?
That one.
Yeah.
I don't see those people winding through all the way back to the Lance Cruz entrance.
Right.
And that's where I'd like to see another entrance on Lance Cruz, to try to reduce the,
Closer to Jefferson?
Like further east, you mean?
Ken,
yeah.
we looked at David's comments on it, and I went on Google Earth, actually this afternoon. You have areas in Harrison Township, list of names. I have a list of developments that have over 100, 200 units, McInerney's,
Ashby
Ashbury
Preserve.
Park, there's a couple off of Coleridge where they have 10 times units with one access. I don't have a problem with putting another approach in. We took the approaches out because all the previous comments that were in the meeting and we were all here. There are several communities, not listing Clinton Township and every place else, but in Harrison Township, within a mile of each direction that have hundreds of units with one approach. And to me, McInerney's is a prime example because you have 1,000 boats and the 100 units of condominiums, not 28. So two approaches for 28 units. It's probably not going to be a problem. The people on Jefferson, they're going to know where the approaches are before they buy the units. So they're going to elect to buy that unit knowing that these parking areas are going to be complete. Rob Bush was not, the less approaches, the better for the county. That's why we pulled everything off of Jefferson. Then we had another approach going to the right of Building C. Actually, that road behind the buildings on Jefferson, if you remember when we approached it, that was a thoroughfare going
Yeah.
straight through. But listening to the neighbors, we eliminated those two to prevent like a shortcut if there was a lineup on Pontchartrain or Jefferson is shooting through the community. So,
Which I totally understand, and it does make sense. The only other, I know there's been concerns about more of the traffic rerouting to Pontchartrain is my only concern. Has there been any proposals where you had like a separation between the Pontchartrain units and the rest of the units? Like the drive didn't connect all the way through? So that only the units on building F on Pontchartrain were the only ones that exited onto Pontchartrain?
you can only have 800 or 880 lineal feet of road without a cul-de-sac or an egress for the fire.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I never really looked at that. Just looking at the plans, I think we exceed 880 feet. But we would have to put a cul-de-sac in somewhere for the fire trucks to turn around or a big T.
But also,
I am glad to hear that you've looked at a lot of the options, that you've considered them, so I do appreciate that.
Like I said, the
but
fewer meetings for
also,
me, the
if you're
better.
trying to get to 16 Mile from there, you're gonna go out Lance Cruz. The pavement condition is better, and you're not making that right turn to then make
Yeah,
a
Pontchartrain
left
puts you
turn.
right back
Yes.
to Lance Cruz.
Unless you're
So-
really
Or
local,
Jefferson to
you
Crocker,
don't
'cause it's
realize
quicker.
what a shortcut Lance Cruz is.
Yeah.
For example, I had dinner with my 86-year-old parents tonight at Luigi's because it was convenient to take them there and come here. When I left, I take Lance Cruz the 16-mile road. It cuts 10 minutes off of my drive time. My father, who has been to Luigi's before this owner, 50 years ago, he goes out Jefferson to Shook Road and all the way back around to go back to Clinton Township. So unless you're a very local person, people don't, not everybody knows that Lance Cruise is just like a
Straight
shortcut.
Okay. Like I
More
said,
and more people will know that as they address it, but
I appreciate that you've looked into a lot of the options, that you just didn't go with one thing and move forward, so I appreciate that.
I
Well-
spent a lot of time thinking about that
Yeah.
too, and at the end of the street that I live on, there's, the pavement is terrible, and we do everything to avoid taking that route, just because makes it more of a pain, so.
Well, we live in a community with 28 homes, one entrance. And to be honest, we like it because it restricts the traffic. There's still enough room we've got 2 cul-de-sacs, enough room for the fire to do their thing, do their radius turning. But it's nice to, when you've got a private community, to have control over, not control, but to restrict the access points and the egress and.
people are not gonna go through this association for a shortcut.
Correct, exactly, and having only those 2 points would certainly deter that, which.
More
I think is a good
inconvenient
thing.
for the outsiders than
Yeah.
insiders.
Yep. But I do appreciate your point. And looking at this, trying to figure out how a fire truck is gonna make that turn. But Mr. Shackett, Fire Marshal Shackett has,
And when we sit down with Dave, if he feels strongly about another approach,
Okay.
we'll forget the 10-foot sidewalks and put in the approach. But that,
No, she ignored you completely.
any of the other items that we wanna?
I'm just looking
got,
at the site flow on there,
Yeah,
on the aerial.
after you, I had one more thing. So.
Okay, no, that's what we're here for.
Let's go after this one more time.
Okay,
We're getting someplace,
all
okay?
right. You want me to go back to that page 4, to the chart?
No, actually, I'm gonna go to the drawing this time.
Okay.
Sheet number ASP, which I believe is the drawing that Adam has up there. Let's try this on.
All right, I've got the big one.
Given the requirements for parking, check mark, okay? Accepting that the strategy to count the double wide driveway as providing access for the visitor, check mark. I think it's a good strategy, right? Now I'm getting hung up on proximity, okay? So follow me here, which I think it works, it solves all these issues here and solves proximity, okay? So I'm gonna start with building B, okay? If we do that mathematical logic to building B, which I think there's value in this, because now, if you look at this in buildings, you now are solving proximity at the same time, right? As opposed to a total wide site, because what I'm looking at here is you're solving all your visitor and perhaps your half-car parking requirements just south of building C, because that's got like a lot of parking there, and that doesn't necessarily help some of the other places. That's an observation, but let's stick with my thought process here. Building B, I count 6 single-car garages, right? So by your own math, that says we need to provide 3 parking spaces to solve the half-car, right? And we need to provide 6 parking spaces for building B for the visitor, correct? I'm solving this building by building. Does that math make sense to everybody? Because now, like, the 2-car stuff is off the table at this point, right? That's already solved on every solution, the 2-car garage solves everything, right?
Lost me with a 3-foot half.
Building B shows us as 6 units that are a single-car garage, right?
So we need 2.5 units.
Right, so you got 2 provided, you got the garage and the driveway providing the 2, right? And now you gotta
15.
solve the half someplace. And I'm gonna suggest that all of the halves have to get solved adjacent to the building, as opposed to taking the halves way across the site, solving it adjacent to the building. So, follow me in there, so it's 6 times 0.5 is 3 paces for the half-car requirement, and then you need 6 for the visitor, right? Everybody following me with that math? Right. So in my opinion, to solve proximity, on the drawing we're looking at now, where it says 3 spaces to the south and 2 spaces to the east, I believe that should add up to 9. Right? 'Cause now I solve proximity, right?
We bumped it up to 6. Where it says
I think it needs to be 9 to solve proximity. So
Well,
let
we
me
have-
just finish with my thought process here first, okay? Building A is solved, because that's a 2-car garages, plenty of parking, no issue there.
Yeah.
Building C, I count 1, 2, 3 units that require half-car. Okay? So that's 1.5, plus 3 is 4.5, right? I say, where they show 2 plus 6, I think that only needs to say 5, in my opinion, because now that solves parking and proximity.
So
And they-
basically, you're saying taking what's in front of building C, putting that in
Shifting it
front
down
of
a little.
Yeah,
what's in front of B, and then moving that.
yeah, I'm not gonna
Yes.
suggest that we gotta change the numbers, but put them in the right place.
Proximity.
Yes.
Right.
Okay,
That's
I'm
really all I'm gonna
following.
say, so maybe my math, you can follow the math, maybe I don't have to go through the whole test here.
Sure.
But to me, that would be a logical solution. Now, where you might end up having to add 1 or 2 cars is just like what I did here for building C, where I came up with a half. Logic would dictate, just round it up to the next whole number. So as opposed to 4.5 spaces supporting building C, you put 5,
Put 5.
as opposed to the 8. Okay? And you could run this logic test around the site, and I'm not gonna label you, but I believe that solves Adam's request, it solves proximity, which is part of, there was no measurement, but this was logic tested to me, that let's solve it right in front of the building itself.
And so those 6 parking places in front of Building C, I would think that the easternmost site, also accommodate Building D, because the 4 that are in front of Building D and E are shared. So increase the number in front of B, decrease the number in front of C,
Yes.
and then increase the number in, split in between D and E.
Which I
The
think.
D and
four.
E will
I've
need
already
some more
said.
spaces, I believe,
Yeah.
I
just
think
looking
they
at
already
it.
said
And
they added
increasing
one
it
there.
above F, which they
F is
they
gonna
said
need
they
more.
had
They said,
addressed.
yeah.
Same
They said
logic
they were gonna
applies
do
to
that.
F, right?
Okay,
Just
got
do
it.
the math, and F's gonna suggest you need more than just the
It's a puzzle.
2.
Okay.
But that solves proximity, because otherwise, that half-car parking for these people here is somewhere way on the site, which is not practical.
Yeah.
Same for E.
Snow, winter packages. Yep, got it.
I know they said they've addressed a lot of the increasing the spots, but I agree with what you're saying, when they address it, to make sure it's in proximity.
Yeah,
So
be
I think-
specific.
I think your math works out.
The logic.
Yep.
Yep. Good thing we have an architect on it. Okay, Mr. Mulder, you had an item?
The only other thing, and this is probably a little late to the party, it was in reference to Selfridge's comments. And with the density and then also with the retention pond. And I really don't even know how to address that at this point, because we've already moved past, like, the rezoning.
The zoning, yeah.
I was looking, while we were sitting here, I pulled up the parcel explorer for the county, and all of the, like, even the homes on Pontchartrain are at a density above 2 homes per acre. And there's a lot of, in the AP Zone 1, where we have much more intense multifamily uses in that zone. And I do know in the past, you know, and Ken said when he was up here, that it is a recommendation. It would have been nice to have this prior to rezoning, but we've already gone through that step. It's kind of my thought process on that. And as far as the pond goes with the wildlife, it's very unfortunate, because we're in the middle of 2 flyways for birds. So
Yes.
there's 300 species of birds that are spotted at Lake St. Clair Metro Park every spring. So it's just a really, difficult thing to plan around. Especially, you know, we want to protect the base and we want, you know, it's a struggle to, you know, I think they said, you know, changing it to a detention pond and keeping it dry is probably
A better answer.
the best answer to not attract birds and waterfowl, but also then, you know, we're talking about adding flowers on the corner, which attract things, and so it's just it's a difficult issue to plan around. Unless we just want to mowed grass for the whole site.
Which we don't. We want it to look nice. Yeah, it's just.
And I
think
hope
we're
at
beyond
the
that point,
next
but
meeting,
yes.
we'll get some more guidance. What's acceptable, what, you know, what's not.
I think their, development in general is moving away from retention, and it's more detention for many reasons, mosquitoes,
Mosquitoes.
liability, and usually there's like a 48-hour drawdown time that's required. So I'm not sure if that's the exact time, but there is a time that's required to draw down.
So I just wanted to make sure we didn't, even though we're beyond the rezoning part, that we didn't look past Selfridge's recommendations and that the applicant realizes that, so.
Yeah. It'd be very helpful at the zoning phase to have
Have all those pieces, yeah. Well, moving forward.
So that was my only other comment.
It probably starts at the master plan phase.
I was gonna just ask, is this
You
even
know.
in our master plan?
We'll need to address it. We're required by law to address airport approach plans in our master plan. The challenge, as Amanda brought up, is, look, that zone, that APZ 1 and 2, I mean, that's Harrison Township's waterfront
Right,
district. That is
that's an
DDA
established
district.
community for
You
100
have,
years.
You know, hundreds of apartment units, hundreds of residential units there. Two dwelling units per acre is unlike even the single-family residential neighborhood beyond it, you know, so it's like, in order to comply with this, we'd have to downzone our entire community. And we'd have every single, you know, development that's above 2 units per acre, which that entire zone very likely is. You know, so it's a challenge, you know,
Well, and we're already a challenged community. I
Yeah.
mean, we are a mixed community,
yeah.
and we know that.
Right.
And we have to work around that in everything that comes before us.
Right.
So,
But it does start at the master plan. We should need to have these discussions at the master plan, which informs the zoning,
yeah.
which then informs, you know, when you do a rezoning request, you look at the master plan, what does it say? But then there's still the whole part of like, how do we reconcile what they're asking
Yeah.
versus what's been done
And we're
over
due to have those
hundreds of
conversations
years of,
soon,
you know,
or didn't we just have that?
decades of development
so.
here in the county.
Yeah, yeah.
Not just here, I mean, that 2 units per acre is
Yeah.
like rural,
Yeah,
you know, that wouldn't
Right.
even support our tax base.
Right, right.
I guess the other thing too is, I know there's plans to shift the runway north, which would put this out of the perimeter B as well, so,
right.
That's a good point. If
So
the
hopefully they'll be
runway's
a part
gonna
of
move
the
in the
master
future,
plan
then.
process.
Yeah.
it's just gonna move north, so,
Then less of that area would be in those.
well,
APC.
you would be out of perimeter B,
Right. Right.
Definitely more conversations to be had.
and possibly out of APZ too. But good stuff to keep in mind in the future.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
We'll try and cover a lot of that.
Yeah.
I think it's more of the density, it's more of trying to not, like, increase density, we understand what the density is now, you know, to try not to put high density uses in those areas if possible.
Mr. Mulder, anything else?
No, that's it.
Okay. Mr. Tominello, anything?
I'm good, thank you.
Ms. Oparka?
I'm good.
Mr. Batcha?
I'm good.
Ms. Devlin?
Yep, all set.
Me too. Okay, what do we want to do?
Do we need to do a motion?
Adam, does this require a motion at this?
Yeah, so you are required to issue approval. What you could do, and I think you've been very clear in your comments and suggestions to the applicant. It doesn't have to be a formal, I wouldn't say that you necessarily have to list each of the items that you discussed as conditions. You could simply say, if you wanted to issue approval, you could say approval in concept, incorporating the comments that were noted by the planning commission in the minutes of the meeting. And I think the applicant has heard, Jefferson Avenue 10-foot width sidewalk, the distribution of the parking spaces, so they're proximate to each building, and that makes sense, and other items that were discussed.
And all the items from the other letters.
So you could simply, issue approval of the preliminary site plan based on the comments discussed this evening.
So let me just ask this question then to the applicant, if I might. Are you amenable to all of the items that we spoke to this evening, the items that were addressed in the letters? You had mentioned that you'd already made a majority fix to accommodate those items mentioned. Anything outstanding that you've heard tonight? Anything that you're a dead set no on that you heard tonight?
Nothing that
If
I'm
you could come
upset,
forward.
no.
Sorry, just so that it's recorded.
I heard everything that's said. I agree with most of it. The conversations that I will want to have with the engineer are, and possibly just because I want to lay it all on the table, I will probably go to zoning or ZBA if I need to get a variance on the heavy landscape between the apartments and the new development. My hardship would be that I'm giving up 5 foot of sidewalk for a 10-foot sidewalk going down Jefferson, which is an added cost, and I think it's a waste of money to separate my development from the apartments next door. And we'll have a conversation about any needed egresses to it, because I think as a board and as a developer, we pretty much told the neighbors and neighboring community that we were going to limit the parking, which if Dave comes out and has a good reason, or the fire inspector has a reason that he doesn't like the turns, which I'm comfortable with Larry, I've had conversations with him. Those are the only 2 items that I think are somewhat in question.
Okay. So just to be specific, the landscaping that you are speaking of is just that portion of the property that is adjacent to the apartment complex, not the portion of the property that is truly next door to a home.
Anything abutting the residential houses will abide by the ordinances to
Got
the
it. So
T.
just the portion of the
Correct.
apartment complex is what you're,
And we will do something to provide the necessary square footage of recreational space. Is that how we worded it? So that, you haven't seen the plan that we have, but on the plan that I have and you haven't seen, that might get adjusted a little bit, but we will come in with a plan that works.
okay. All right, based on that comment from the applicant, any additional questions?
Can I make a motion to approve?
I have an open seat. Motion?
Before we do that, I just would like to comment that, so we have a letter from the planner, February 9th, that articulates 17 items of deficiency. Respecting that some of them were somewhat minor in nature, but some of them still had some significant ramification that required further study, planning, documentation. In addition to that, seeing that the February 6th letter from the fire marshal, who also had some concerns and recommended not moving on that until the deficiencies are corrected. I tend to be of the opinion that, that's a lot of deficiencies that, in my opinion, would be better served for the applicant to go back and amend the drawings. And get, this is not just 1 or 2 small things, this is pretty significant.
And come to us
And
with.
then come back and say, yeah, we've caught up with everything, and here you go, and that gives the planner time to review it. All of us know that many times a change to one thing impacts something else, and something else may come out of that change, I don't know. But I just think it would be more prudent for the applicant, for the residents in the township, that they go back and in fact, adjust everything that was addressed today, as well as the items in the planner's letter, as well as the items in the fire marshal's letter, and then come back.
In all fairness, Mark, a lot of the things that are in those letters, we have did our research and went back to the fire marshal, and he misstated a few things, so we provided backup, many hours of research to correct some of the deficiencies that were there that were incorrect. We do have to come back to planning to get final site plan approval. So to reject tonight's preliminary plan approval, and the planners or engineers can correct me if I'm wrong, all of those deficiencies will have to be addressed before we get final site plan approval. So you guys are not approving me to start construction or build. You would just be approving me so that I could spend the next $50,000 or $60,000, $70,000 to go ahead with engineering to provide you with more information that would privy the board for this site to move forward. And the reason that I think time is of the essence is I would like to construct a lot of this project during summer weather where I'm not creating huge messes for the neighbors. I have better construction rather than starting this in November and building it through the winter with a lot of winter conditions and winter covering. The roads aren't going to be as good. Your roads aren't going to be as good because they're going to be softer. With the momentum that we have going now, if we get approved, we're looking at a lot of this construction being built June, July, August, possibly if we can get the engineering correct by the next meeting. It's not going to be easy to get the engineering and all the questions and deviations that you're pointing out corrected in a month, and that's why we worked so diligently with the architect in the past week, so that we could take the next step forward. If we get denied tonight, I think all those deficiencies have already been addressed outside of the main sewer, water, and the big engineering things, which are just, we don't want to go another step into the project and spend the money if we're not sure that this project is moving forward. So all we're asking is for a preliminary site plan. I don't think the township has anything to lose by granting that, because the next step is costing the developer, myself, a lot of money, and I have to address every issue that's in any of those statements, but not all of the items in those statements, in fairness to me, are correct. So, you know, some are opinions, the self-ridge is an opinion, the approach is an opinion.
That's why we, yeah.
So,
I believe that
Mark?
documenting all these, that the developer, which I don't dismiss that you're not, says they can accommodate all this, then I don't find it to be an issue. I just think it'd be best for the developer and the township and the residents that they just document it all, they give to us in order to give a preliminary site plan approval. In my opinion, and my experience would suggest that is the best way to manage it.
I think that follows our normal precedent that we've set for these. I
See,
mean, 17 things is a lot more than we've
Well,
tabled things before.
And it's not
or
just
in
the
past.
17 things, it's that, I mean, he had indicated that the three main items on the fire marshal were addressed. But I wish Fire Marshal Shackett were here this evening so we could, and I'm not sure why he's not. He's generally with us. Did he, I'm just gonna throw it out there, did he call or request any information regarding tonight?
And they need reasonable,
Okay. All right.
there's reasonable review time that's
Yep.
required as
Yep.
well.
Yep.
I mean, it's not a denial.
Right, it's not a denial. I see where you're going, Mr. Batcha. You're talking table to allow the item that you have, the fixes that you have on that document, because those address a majority of the items in the planner's letter and possibly in the engineer's letter, minus the large things that, like you had said, are the next major phase. It does follow our path
Yeah.
that we've established, and it keeps us all honest, it keeps us all,
Well, you
in
get it
line.
here or you get it at the final, but.
but I do understand that this is a preliminary, and I think Adam's letter, his paragraph in the end, really says it, you know, the overall plan for the site, including basic road and unit configurations and consistency of the plans with all applicable provisions for the Harrison Township zoning ordinance and master plan. They're of the opinion that the preliminary site plan demonstrates general conformance.
It's just a lot of items.
It is a lot of items.
To the point, usually when it's a handful, we can find a way of
Yeah.
working through
Although,
conditions.
you know, a lot of them we went through and we established this evening.
And the applicant has said that they'll accommodate it, so to me, it's like, fine.
Yeah.
Put it in a drawing and
Yeah.
we can move on.
Yeah, and
It's
then
okay.
they might even be, I don't know, did you get a copy of the new, you got a copy of the new?
I didn't, and there are changes, but nobody has seen it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we haven't had an
It does
opportunity to-
appear that there's been
Planner.
movement.
Right.
But we just got the document today, so that's not fair for anybody to,
Right.
to review just this as we're sitting here to make one sheet of paper. I think
Yeah.
it needs to be.
And we just got the documents from the township within this week.
Yeah, I mean, I understand, it was hard for you to respond too, I'm not dismissing that, but it just.
So, and
It's hard to
it's
fast
not that
track
we're,
these items,
yeah,
like,
okay, and
yeah.
so one more month to, get all the, you know, what's that old phrase? Dot all the i's, cross all the t's.
There'll be another
So-
series
so
of
we're looking
comments,
at-
even at final site plan approval, the planner's gonna have a whole series of comments based upon that again.
Per-
But that's
per-
gonna be now limited, you would think, after everything's been caught up,
Mm-hmm.
in my opinion.
Correct, so,
But this is just too many, in my opinion, to move
But-
forward.
It's too.
but a lot of those are not the developer's issues, a lot of them are township.
Perhaps,
part of
but we
the-
don't have any
Mistakes.
documentation, perhaps, but the fire marshal hasn't given us a letter saying it's been remedied. I mean, only thing we know is what they said, and they said there's issues, that's all we know. I'm not suggesting that it's not been remedied, but we don't know it right now.
All I'm asking for is if we deny preliminary site plan approval,
Table,
table
not
site plan
deny.
approval,
Deny.
we go
We're not
to,
talking deny.
we go to next month, and I still don't have major engineering, so that's gonna be approved next month, then we'll go to engineering. I don't think we're gonna, what's our chances of getting through on the first meeting with engineering, Adam? 0? So the engineering is not going to get approved, we're gonna have adjustments there, and then go to month number 4, where in between now and next month, we could eliminate the one step for everybody.
Yeah, Madam Chair, if I can address the engineering review real quickly,
Say-
once we get into detailed engineering review, that doesn't have to come back to planning commission. That's a back and forth between our office and your engineer working through those things. So as quickly as we can get them reviewed and you can get them responded to, they go back and forth. We don't have to take that back to a meeting every time we do something, so don't build that.
Those
into your-
conversations can happen.
Yeah, don't build that into your schedule.
So when I'm done with preliminary plan, I get approved, I don't have to come back to final site plan approval?
You have to
No.
do final site plan approval, but the engineering, you don't have to do a separate meeting for engineering, which is what I thought I heard you say.
Engineering comes
Engineering,
after.
right,
final.
engineering is done outside of the planning commission.
So the difference between the preliminary, where we're at right now, and the final, is that additional information needs to be provided on the final site plan that you haven't seen. Some of those additional details are engineering details. Now, they're not gonna get construction plan approval when you approve a final site plan.
Right, right.
And so what Dave, our township engineer, is saying is that that occurs after final site plan approval from the planning commission during the construction plan review, engineering detail review, building permit, all of that. So there's opportunities for that fine tuning of the engineering to occur after you have signed off on it. Provided it doesn't impact, placement of buildings and, things of that nature. And that's how we've always done it.
Adam,
So,
with the,
it's just kind of a clarification, but if that helps.
with the comments that we're addressing, like the 17 issues or 19 issues, a lot of those comments would be normal to see on the engineering or the next phase of the drawings, correct? 12-inch water mains, fire hydrants, placement of signs.
Those are details that are required on the final site plan, yes.
So those are listed in the things that you're saying that are deficiencies, which was a surprise to us as of the last couple days, because those are things that we would do in the engineering phase, not the architectural phase. The architect doesn't have the ability to place fire hydrants and water mains and those such things. So a lot of those comments, even the fire department's comments, would be a lot of things that are addressed with engineering, I assume.
Yeah, we don't
Yeah.
disagree with that, but you're still within your letter, there are items here that are planning related that are fairly significant, with the trees, the landscape, the berms, the screening. I mean, there's a lot here that, recreation area, what is it? I mean, I know I heard it, we don't see it,
I
I don't know.
I'm agreeing 100% with you, Mark.
That's kind of big stuff that you would expect to be solved at preliminary. I get it, when you get the final, you'll be into details.
And a
but
clear
That's big stuff at this
definition of
stage.
the percentages, even though we've heard that they're
Sure.
supplying,
Time to review.
but seeing it in, at the time, you're right, at the time of review. Yeah, I was just going through the 17 items on Adam's letter, just trying to justify major and minor.
That's what I've been doing.
Yeah.
Also, the fire marshals, I mean, the applicant hasn't objected to any of those, and I
Yeah.
believe those are all, engineering details. I'm looking at the 17 items. I think there's 3 that are basically typos with like the bedrooms and some of the other, which to me are minor details.
I mean, that's not our job. to
No,
It
it's
doesn't
not.
make or break the
Yes,
location of the
yes.
buildings or the, yeah.
Yes, and that's what I'm looking at, is
Yeah.
what are the major things that, on a concept
That's
level
right.
are an issue. And we do have some, there's items 2 and 3, which he's addressed that he'd have to take before ZBA, because he's not comfortable with those.
That's out of our, that's out of us anyway, so.
Yes. 7, 8, 10, I believe are all kind of major details that we'd like to see. The parking, the sidewalks, those are major details. Some of these other
Yeah,
ones,
Yeah,
adding the trees, they've said they'll do that. I mean, they're not moving in between now and the next meeting. So I don't want to make the decision based on the number, but I think there are some major details.
yeah, we are accustomed to seeing
Yes.
before saying yay. So, not denying, not saying go away, just saying provide us with a cleaner view of all of the, a majority of the items that would appear on a preliminary site plan. Would that be accurate, Mr. Basha?
Yeah, maybe what we'll do is, for sake of clarity, is I'll make the motion to table case number 04-23-S, Holzbeck Investments, Jefferson Place, in order to allow the applicant to address the 17 items on the planner's letter
Of
of
February 9th?
February 9th. Do you have the engineer's letter?
February 13th?
February 13th.
To address as applicable the, any items that would be necessary to be prepared on the preliminary site plan from the items addressed on the engineer's letter of February 13th. To address or remedy the items identified in the February 6, 2023 letter from the Harrison Township Fire Marshal, and to address the items that have been discussed here at the planning commission meeting, which would be sidewalks, as well as the interpretation for proximity of parking to the units, and using the logic that was depicted and articulated at today's meeting.
I'll support that motion.
Motion by Mr. Vasha, supported by Ms. Oparka, to table this item referencing the planners, the engineers, and the fire marshals discussion letters, and then the conversation that we had relative to sidewalks and proximity parking. Is there anything else that we want to include?
I would also like to add the letter from Selfridge dated February 14th, addressing the retention and, or
Oh,
detention
got it.
pond,
Yep.
if Mr. Vasha is willing to agree to that.
I'll amend the motion to include the requirements from Selfridge addressing retention versus detention.
Okay. Ms. Oparka?
Yes, I'll support.
Any additional discussion on the motion?
Yeah, just if I can, and I'm not opposed to tabling, but typically, if this was a final site plan review, there would be no question of tabling, because I believe past policy and practice. In fact, we used to have a preliminary meeting before our planning commission meeting to go over items on a final site plan review, and, you know, we said if it's bigger than a bread box and there's more widgets that need to be fixed, you know, versus one or two, we wanted to have that clean, because when it goes to the building department, when the building department's trying to address all these issues that are outstanding on a final site plan, it gets really intense for the building official. But on a preliminary site plan, I believe what we're trying to look at was we're trying to demonstrate if this generally conforms with ordinance requirements, because it's preliminary. So if we were at this point at final, I would absolutely say no way. So I just want to bring that to everyone's attention. This is a preliminary. I think the spirit of the ordinance has been met. I'm not opposed to tabling it, but I just want to bring that up because that is part of planning procedure. And I just want to make everyone aware of that. So, Mr., you know, I guess I just turning to the planner just to get a comment.
Yeah, and again, we've cited the ordinance language. What is your job at this point? Overall plan for the site, including basic road and unit configurations, to make sure that you're comfortable enough to say that, yes, this is or can be consistent with ordinance requirements. My approach, kind of after reviewing it, is to look at it and say, is the final going to be looking similar to what we have? Are we moving buildings? Are we forcing to, you know, redo the layout of the access drives and things? Does the detention pond need to be moved to a different location? The things that I've, you know, in my review, I recognized and noted the parking, you know, deficiencies, the landscaping, but that does not change, you know, any buildings or anything like that. Parking is probably the biggest item that we've discussed that does impact the layout, in the sense that the parking spaces need to be spread out a little differently than what it's shown here. Just to give you the perspective. I think I'm comfortable, as I've indicated in my letter,
Yeah.
that you could move on and do that. I understand the approach or the caution or the hesitancy to not move on without clearing up some of these items which are seen as significant. So it's your call, obviously, but I'd be comfortable to move forward. But if you'd like to, you know, push pause and get those details in place.
And I just want to bring that to everyone's attention, just for reference. I know it's been a while since we've had preliminary and final site plan in front of us. So, I just want to put the facts on the table again. I'm not opposed one way or the other. I just want to state some facts.
And I also agree with Mr. Townell. The other thing I wanted to address, with only 6 members being here today, if a vote were to go 3-3, what would the outcome of that be?
To table.
It would,
It would automatically
New
table,
table anyway.
yeah.
yes.
No.
Right, you do have a motion on the table that has
Yes,
been.
we have a motion on the floor, right?
That was my only comment to the
Okay.
motion.
Any additional comment on the motion? Roll call, please, Ms. Oparka.
Member Boccia?
Yes.
Member Oparka, yes. Member Devlin?
Yes.
Member Mulder?
Yes.
Member Tomanello?
Yes.
Chair Murray?
Yes. Okay, you are tabled to provide, as we stated, all of the items on the next, on the preliminary site plan, as noted, discussed tonight, mentioned in the letters and documentation, conversations, and then we will see you in March 16th, hopefully.
And there are steps to speed that up to get a special meeting.
Oh,
if needed.
yes, that's true. That's true. Sabrina, what are the requirements for a special meeting?
We have to pay the fees, and I have to see if all of you are available on a certain date. I have to see if the boardroom was available.
And then the submission deadline for,
It's normally, well, for resubmission, it's at least 2 weeks before the next meeting.
So that'd have to be tomorrow.
I'd have to see what dates are available.
Thank you.
The planner would need time to review.
Madam Chair?
yeah.
Before anybody leaves, I just want to mention something real quick. When I came in, I know, I'm not sure what the weather's done in the last 2.5 hours, but when I came in, the walkway, the wood walkway coming up was getting pretty slick, so if
Yeah.
you're heading up, please be careful.
For me too.
Yeah.
Okay, very careful. Yeah, I almost fell.
All right, take care, gentlemen. Thank you.
That's all we need.
Okay, Ms. Parker, our next item, our public hearing?
Zoning ordinance amendments, waterfront fence ordinance language changes.
We had a workshop recently, and we talked about items and basically agreed on the verbiage changes, and you're bringing those forward to us?
Yes, so I can just share with you, so we did meet in January, and not everyone was there, but we had enough of the planning commission present. We did go through the waterfront fencing amendments that we had looked at previously, looking at some additional tweaks and revisions. As you recall, we're talking about.
Just briefly, so the red is gonna depict what was addressed
Yes.
on January?
The red is going to depict what is proposed in this current draft.
So this is gonna be changed from the previous ordinance?
It was
Or
never, it
from
was never,
January's meeting?
it was never passed.
Right, so, but the
Right.
changes are gonna be, the baseline to the change is what document?
Yeah, so I think I know what you're getting at, Mark. We had previously seen a draft that was through us in November, December-ish.
Right.
We've now made revisions to that, and to be honest, I don't have a draft that shows the revisions to the revisions, or the revisions from the original, right? This draft just depicts how the existing language currently adopted is proposed to change.
Got it.
Based on our discussions at the workshop.
Right, but the baseline is still the original.
Correct. So everything in black is existing adopted language.
Got it, thank you.
Yep. So tonight is a public hearing to hear any citizen comment with regard to this item, and we are talking specifically about fencing within a waterfront yard, so that would be between a house and the waterfront area. There are a variety of provisions already in place in the zoning ordinance. The section that is applicable here, where we're talking, this section is non-residential and multiple family areas. We are talking about single-family residential zones, single-family residential uses. And this section deals with waterfront yards, or waterfront fencing in a yard abutting water. And so what we've got here is proposal to clean up the language. There was some discrepancies about, the heading of the section talks about fences, walls, hedgerows, and protective barriers, whereas this current language just says waterfront fencing, and we were like, well, does it mean also, does it apply to barriers and hedgerows? So we're clarifying that it does. This language in here, we're split it up, where previously the language talked about two aspects. One aspect was the obscuring nature, and the other aspect was the height. So we're kind of splitting it up, so we're talking about only non-obscuring fences, walls, hedgerows, and protective barriers may be installed within the first 30 feet of the seawall or the water line, as applicable at a maximum of 4 feet high. We talked here, fences, walls, hedgerows, and protective barriers not greater than 2 feet in height are exempt from this non-obscuring requirement. We had talked about that language, that's something that we agreed on, that if we're gonna allow 4 foot tall, then isn't 2 foot, not obscuring, because it's no more than 50%. Then we split this, the item B is where we talked about the material character, right? Decorative versus decorative, where previously we talked about it in one section, and this is kind of making it more cleaner and easier to enforce. So this is talking about the height and the obscuring nature of the fence, wall, or hedgerow. This is now talking about the decorative nature of the hedgerow. Fences, walls, and protective barriers installed within the first 30 feet of the seawall or the water line shall be decorative. And what do we mean by that? Decorative wall materials include brick and stone, but not exposed concrete block or cinder block. Decorative fence materials include wrought iron, aluminum, wood, vinyl, or vinyl-coated chain link, but not galvanized chain link. So we talk about examples of what could be included, not an all-inclusive list, but we definitely mention ones that are not considered decorative. And we did that both for a wall and a fence. That's the proposed change there. And then this is no different from what we've seen before, where we created this illustration that just kind of shows exactly what non-obscuring means. This illustration shows that from the middle of the fence post to the middle of the fence post, within that area, you can see it has to be either, if it's obscuring, if it's more than 50%, and it's non-obscuring if it's less than 50%. And we also did clarify, this was a ZBA thing, about the support width. No individual support for the fence can be greater than 12 inches. We had talked about how do you measure it, from average grade, from highest point, lowest point, and that was really challenging us, and we debated that at length during our workshop, and we just simply decided let's keep it simple, stupid, use the current average grade language that is in the ordinance already as our measurement when we say, well, what is 4 feet measured from? It's the average grade. That's the language that we have. We then sent this language to our building official, whose department is responsible for enforcing it, and who had commented on the previous language about, this is really a challenge. And he gave us 2 thumbs up, like this is more simple and as far as he's concerned, would help alleviate
Takes the question.
the issues that really brought this about in the first place. So tonight is a public hearing. Before we open the public hearing, I guess let's throw it back to you if you have any questions for me. And hopefully this may not be a perfect solution. We could very well find a year from now or 3 years from now that we might need to go back and change it again. We could certainly do that. But at this point, it was kind of agreed upon by the committee that we should move forward with this language.
Yeah, I think our efforts were to alleviate the issue.
Yes.
Alleviate the question and the confusion.
Provide clarity.
Clarity, exactly. And like you said, keep it simple, stupid. And we met a couple of times, and then we've discussed it ad nauseum. And you have come up with a clean explanation. So, any comments from any of us before we open the public hearing?
Thanks for all your work on this, Adam. And really the commission. And one role of the ZBA is that if things start coming to the ZBA, then
Right.
that's
Let us know.
an
An
indication
Yep.
that there might need to be changes in the ordinance, so.
Has this clarified or mitigated the risk that there is a potential interpretation here that could suggest you build a 2-foot-high masonry obscuring wall?
Right.
Because it says you can,
Brick wall.
right? And then put a 2-foot-high fence on top of it.
So
Have we-
one of the things that we talked about, and this actually came from a comment from the building official, when we talked about this, is with regard to fences in particular, that you can't really find a fence that's 2 feet in height. It comes in sections and, 4 feet, 6 feet, and without somebody literally like buying a 4 foot and chopping it, or, to do that. So we saw it as a practical difficulty, and so I think we kind of just weighed is that practically something that could happen?
Plus, wouldn't that be more than 50% obscuring then, at that point?
I suppose you could make that argument if the
Well, it would be,
wall is
that's what I'm trying to
solid.
eliminate
Unless you're gonna
that.
throw a chain link
But
on
even
it.
to
We
that
say here that
point,
you
like-
can build masonry up to 2 feet, and we stop. We don't, the intent there, which made complete sense.
That's,
But
but
that's
that's
your- that is your
50,
barrier.
that's 50% obscuring.
Right, but you stop, you can't put anything on top of it.
Right.
And I'm not, I was just asking, do we have
But then
language
might
here
they
that prevents people from putting it on
shorten
top
it
of
to
it?
1.5 foot so that they could put those, So we could what if ordinance language all we want, and we're never gonna find the perfect solution. We talked about that and we said from a practical standpoint. And that's actually why we got rid of or we went back to the average grade language, because when you're starting to have to chop the height to
Right.
meet the grade and stuff, that's
Yeah.
when no offense, contractor would do that because it doesn't come that way without completely customizing it. Is it a perfect solution?
But this has
Could
been
some-
reviewed by the
yeah.
department that had the questions and was confronted with the issues.
Yeah.
And felt that these changes were a clean way around those issues.
But to your example, we would have to measure the opacity. If within the 4 foot height, is it more than 50% or not? And so, if they did the 2 foot walls
Then
completely
you're
solid,
done.
then you
can't
couldn't put anything
you
above
can't put
it.
anything on top of it. then.
Right.
And the words here do say that it's 50%
Yep.
opacity for 4 feet, so.
Yep.
This gave them the freedom, which we thought which was very creative for the residents. They can choose how they want to create their opacity.
Right.
Is what this did.
Right.
All right. So 50%, that's pretty easy. So, all right.
And just to clarify, the exemption in 4A for the, any fences, walls, or hedgerows less than 2 feet does not exempt it from 4B with the materials.
Right.
So they still have to meet all the material requirements, even if it's a 2 foot high wall.
Yep. It's only an exemption for the obscuring
Yeah.
aspect, not the decorative nature. Yeah. So even if it's 1 foot, it has to be decorative.
Okay, do we want to ask any more questions, or do we want to go ahead and open the public hearing?
I'll make a motion to open the public hearing.
I'll
Thank
support.
you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I
Motion
think-
carries.
I think we opened a public hearing, I believe it's a roll call, is that correct?
Well, we had that discussion
For opening
the
the
last
public hearing?
meeting, and I thought Rosemary had indicated that it's not necessary. It's something we've done
Okay.
a lot, but it
Someone
wasn't a requirement.
A member can request it.
Yeah, oh, okay, thank you,
Okay.
yes. Yeah, but not a requirement.
Okay,
Are you requesting?
no,
Okay, thank you. Public hearing is now open. So the rules, everyone gets an opportunity to talk. 3 minutes or less, and we'll set the timer. Or was it 2? I think it's 3.
3,
I think it's 3.
specific to the topic.
Yes, your comments have to be specific to the item that we're discussing here tonight. If something is said, we've got it written down, so it doesn't have to be, reiterated from several people. Keep your comments clean, please. I don't think I have to go into much more detail than that. Let us know who you are. Thank you.
I'm Cynthia Wyatt. My question is, how will you control these hedges from not growing up high, covering up areas on people? Is the building department going to enforce that people have to trim these hedges? If you're going to allow these, because hedges grow high.
Could you state your address, please?
26931 Pontchartrain Street, Harrison Township.
Thank you.
That's my biggest concern about allowing people to put hedges in.
Thank you. Anyone else? If no other comments, no other questions, motion to close the public hearing, please.
So moved.
Ms. Devlin?
Support.
Mr. Batcha? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, public hearing is closed. Do we want to address that comment? I think we all know the answer, but Adam, if you would like to go ahead.
And I've actually had discussions with our building official about that. It's my understanding that we do regulate and enforce the height of hedgerows, and that has become, they've been made aware through complaints over time, from neighbors about hedgerows growing taller than what the ordinance allows. So we're not making any changes as it relates to the current language, which currently allows hedgerows. But within the waterfront yard, even a hedgerow is restricted and must comply with these rules. And so the building department will require hedgerows to be trimmed to comply if necessary.
Or spaced
So-
out.
Or spaced out.
Right, or spaced out. So compliance issue.
Yep.
Ms. Wyatt, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Okay, good. You're welcome. Okay, any other comments regarding this?
If you wanted to move forward, you would need to send a recommendation to the township board.
Could we would have to do that in form of a motion, and could we
Yes.
do that tonight?
You could do that tonight.
Okay.
Yes.
Motion?
I will make a motion to approve the proposed waterfront fencing ordinance amendments
January 20th.
and dated January 20th, 2023.
Recommend approval.
You make a recommendation.
Recommend approval.
Right. Recommend
Recommended adoption.
adoption. Okay.
Yes.
Support.
Okay, Ms. Loparka and Mr. Mulder. Discussion on the motion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Loparka, sorry, let me get this down. And then, who opened the public hearing? That was Amanda and
Larry.
Larry? Okay, thank you. Okay, unfinished business? New business? Correspondence? Comments from the planner?
Yeah, so I think we've had 2 tech team meetings between the last time that we've met as a planning commission. Our tech team meeting held in January had several cases, just wanted to make you aware. One of them was a gentleman who was proposing along Jefferson Avenue. This was a discussion-only item. Had an idea to do car condos along Jefferson Avenue. So picture kind of like a garage that's very nice, maybe a man cave kind of a thing. You can do your work on your cars. You might have a kitchenette. Wanted to turn that into a condo development. So there's a grouping of properties that he was looking potentially to purchase, and was asking what would be the process to get something like this approved. And so we just kind of went through that with him. Gave him a lot of food for thought, including a lot of engineering details and suggestions. You better talk to the county about this. You better talk to this person about this. And so I'm not sure where it's at, but it was a good discussion. And it was an interesting idea. And it seemed like in Harrison Township would be a really good use, quite frankly, if it's located properly. Boat town, maybe have a spot to bring in your boat, work on it, kind of a thing. Whatever you want to say. So that was one case. Discussion only, no decisions. Another one was, this is a person also on Jefferson Avenue, north of Metro Parkway. So was the car condo idea, was Jefferson north of the Parkway. Somebody had a couple of adjacent properties, was looking to do a 4-unit multifamily residential development. There's some issues with setbacks and things. You might need to get some variances. This was a discussion-only item. It would have to come before the planning commission, of course. And then the last item that month was Sarnes Marine. This is on the south side of North River Road, looking at fencing around an area that had quite a bit of marine outdoor storage. No decision was made, but we did delegate authority to the building official to be able to approve a proposed screening fence, provided that they give the building official some more details about the color and the materials. And then we had another discussion-only item. This was in February, earlier this month, from Gino's restaurant. They were looking at facade changes and also asking about potential interior renovations and things of that nature. It was a discussion-only item, and so we kind of gave them some feedback, and they have their work to do as well, some due diligence before they can come back before the tech team.
And that's it?
That's my report on the
That's,
tech team.
that was a big list.
Yeah, we had some interesting discussions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Comments from the floor? Our next meeting is Thursday, March 16th, 2023. We'll see you then. May I have a motion to adjourn, please?
So moved.
Mr. Batcha, Ms. Devlin. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Take care, everyone.